Welcome to Prototype Thinking in Action. This is the podcast where we talk to founders, dive into one big challenge that they are facing, and help them solve it by using the prototype thinking method. Let's get started.
Hi, Mina. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jaylee. I'm really excited to be here.
So you are working on one of the most intriguing enterprise tools that I've ran across in the past year. I'm so excited to talk to you about what you've been building and working on.
Thanks. Start out blushing. All right.
Just to get us started, why don't you give just like a quick overview of what the current version of what you're working on is?
Sure. So essentially, productivity tools have kind of bottlenecked. We've done a really great job of streamlining communication. We've done a really great job of streamlining products and tasks. But what we haven't done a great job of is streamlining the actual cognitive process of prioritizing, initiating, and completing each part of a task. And that's messing up deadlines. That's messing up communication. It's causing severe burnout and tearing up organizations from the inside out. So what I'm working on right now is a tool to help weigh the cognitive availability, essentially, of an individual to make sure that they have the intervention and the awareness to actually prioritize the right tasks, initiate them at will, and complete each part efficiently.
In a previous version of this, it was actually literally targeted as an ADHD executive tool, right?
It's true. So my research is actually an executive function, and that's the set of cognitive abilities that allows you to use your working memory to complete each part of a task and allows you to do that at will. There are people with chronic executive dysfunction, and that's from, say, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, or prolonged burnout. And we're seeing more and more of that now with, say, long COVID is causing these executive function misfires. And so I started my research with executive dysfunction to understand essentially how to support people across a bigger cloud, a bigger spectrum of cognitive ability and variability. So people who have chronic executive dysfunction tend to also be extremely creative, very, very passionate, and good at getting fanatic about ideas and concepts. But everyone deals with executive dysfunction at some point in their day. Some people have this problem chronically. Others have it as a result of being tired, of being upset by a previous communication, of their blood sugar not being right, being interrupted too many times. So executive function or executive dysfunction can be chronic or acute. And starting this research going directly into people with chronic executive dysfunction has given us an extremely detailed view of what cognitive fluctuation looks like so that we can actually support people across the entire spectrum of cognition.
That is incredibly fascinating to me, especially when you bring up long COVID, because so many people are impacted by the cognitive effects of long COVID. And it has a really, really notable economic consequence. And there are people who haven't coped with brain fog and executive dysfunction in the past, being like, what is going on with me? And why can't I work on the things I want to work on right now?
Exactly. And they also haven't had the opportunity to build the pathways that they'll need to be able to accommodate for the old pathways not working anymore. One of the benefits of having dealt with executive dysfunction lifelong and having the opportunity to work with people who are dealing with it later in life because of problems like Alzheimer's or dementia, I've been able to watch and document both the observable and the person's reported experience of developing internal compensations for executive dysfunction so that they can stay closer and closer to the kind of performance that they're used to.
So can you talk a little bit about how your product actually works?
Sure. So we have 3 steps. Essentially, this tool can detect, determine, and intervene. So we're detecting cognitive friction early. We're able to tell weeks in advance whether or not an individual or a team is going to hit a deadline and pass that information on to a product manager or decision maker early on so that they can make decisions or adjustments early on. We then determine at the individual level whether or not that friction is caused by the workload or something else. And then once we have that information, we intervene. So the tool was previously for solopreneurs with ADHD. The evolved version of this tool is called Rhenari. Some of our interventions are, say, coaching, like, hey, I noticed that you just got out of a meeting and you're having a hard time kicking off this next project. Why don't you take 10 deep breaths instead? Or the intervention could be something like, hey, I see that this has become kind of chronic. Here are some of the tools in the company benefits package that might help you moving forward. Or it could be acute. It looks like you haven't told your manager that you're struggling with this project. Here's a draft of an email that you can send to them to ask for the help you need. Would you like that to be
Interesting.
forwarded? So detect, determine, and intervene.
So who is the day-to-day user?
Day-to-day user, it's a cross spectrum. If you imagine an organization as an organism, Rhenari is the nervous system for the future of work. Everyone is using this tool and it's adapting to each and every person. But there are also admin dashboards that help you help your staff. So the goal is to be able to help the people who are making decisions make smarter decisions, and to help the people who are fulfilling those decisions every day stay aligned with company initiatives without burning out.
Okay, so if I'm, a designer on a team, then I have the tool and it's occasionally pinging me to help me manage my own executive dysfunction. But at the same time, my manager gets a different view of it, which is like tracking executive function relative to progress of projects and reminders or proactive suggestions for different types of manager interventions.
Exactly.
Is there a dashboard above the manager level?
There is. There's an owner dashboard. So if we're looking at how the individual teams actually coordinate to help fulfill higher level KPIs or higher level initiatives, that's the view that they're seeing. You know that you want to raise revenue by 10%. That means that you're going to have to lower your actual cognitive load by 10% so that people can fulfill this at a higher level, is the kind of information that you're seeing at that ownership dashboard.
So it's spoons budgeting.
Yes, it's spoons budgeting.
So it's like, let's budget and manage spoons like cash.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
That's such a great way to put it. That's exactly it. We know how many spoons each person on your team has. We know how many spoons they have across the board. And we know that you've squeezed too many spoons into that deadline.
Yeah.
You can choose quality or you can push. You just got through with a sprint, so you need to give people 3 days to catch up before you move into the next sprint. It's spoons budgeting.
Can you quickly explain what spoons are for our viewing audience?
Sure. Spoons are just essentially how much energy you have in a day. You can spend all of your spoons on one project, or you can pass out spoons throughout the day. It's a way for people, especially neurodivergent people, to think about what to say yes to, what to say no to, and realize that our energy is not infinite. We do have to budget where
Yeah,
we
it's like
spend
our
our time
doing
and
stuff
energy.
points, or like our
Exactly.
executive function points. It's like your mana pool.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it's like, this is the mana pool of your employees. So the last understanding question I have is, what from a technical standpoint or from a literal tool standpoint is this? Like, is it its own tool? Is it like a Slack integration? Like, where does it
So
live?
we have options, and our two major options are modular API infrastructure, or we're actually looking at MCP, Model Context Protocol, because a lot of the tools that we have to integrate with are introducing their own AI agent. And I think that would actually be a much more powerful and much more useful integration process.
So those are both backend options though, right?
Those are backend options. Yeah. And so for the front end, we have multiple options too. And this is where I'm at with the prototyping, is trying to figure out what people are most comfortable with, because one of the most important KPIs early on is actually going to be those intervention interactions and success. So we don't want to be Clippy from, the old Microsoft Clippy that's popping up randomly, being completely annoying. And we also don't want to be in a situation where we miss an opportunity to intervene in real time and coach an employee when it matters most. So that is one of the most important things to test right now, is how much intervention, how do we optimize that, and how can we switch that?
I think that's why my mind immediately went to Slack, because everyone's getting Slack notifications for everything anyway, and you're kind of tracking your flow of conversation there, and it's easy to create a Slack integration. Whereas if you're creating like a Microsoft integration, like that's a closed system.
Yeah, the problem with Slack is that that's exactly the problem. We need to get people off of these Slack notifications, because context switching is one of the fastest, hardest, easiest ways to burn out.
So you can't live
your
on the
employees
context
all the
switching.
time.
Okay.
Exactly.
Fascinating. So you're still working out the form factor. Got it. Okay, cool. I think that's a great segue to where you're currently at with the current state of Rhenari and what you most need right now as a business.
So I've spent the last few months in customer discovery, and that's how I got from this being an individual thing for individual support to really seeing the organism of these bodies. When I was talking to product managers, they're like, hey, you've got to talk to my HR. Hey, you've got to talk to my engineering, because they're all having the same problems and they're all talking about these problems in a different way. And just that communication misalignment is making it harder for everyone to align on initiatives. So I've gone through that customer discovery process, built something that companies are like, yeah, if you can solve this problem, we'll pay for it. I have a small wait list right now, but now it's just, I know what the back end is. I know how to build the detection model, but how do we present it in a way that people will actually adopt it?
Let's dive into that. This is an experiment I want to run with you. We talked a little bit about this tool that we are experimenting with right now called the product market fit staircase, which is a ladder of a journey that founders have to go through between conceiving of an idea and successfully achieving product market fit. And the key is that there's a bunch of risks you have to answer in order to not have it fall apart post launch. And you have to answer it all in approximately that order, because higher up questions will be logically dependent on the answer to lower down questions. So if you kind of try to go too high up first, then you waste your time solving that, and then it turns out to be obsoleted by a lower one. So you and I had talked previously about building a product market staircase for enterprise solutions. So I drafted a live of this just for us to work on today. Let's just try doing the assessment together and seeing how it works.
Awesome.
Some basic disclaimers about the enterprise staircase. One is there's way more things on it than the consumer staircase, but each thing is smaller. The other one is I'm going to have to figure out how to make this as a tool later, because it's not actually that much of a staircase. If you look at the gray lines, you kind of have to solve it by gray zone, but there's this giant category in the middle, and you can kind of do any of them in any order. And it actually helps if you just kind of go back and forth.
Gosh, look, I wish I had had this when I started over, because this is the kind of thing that I was just figuring out myself. And I like bounced around in some places. I went from like, is it technically possible? And a little bit of what systems? And I jumped straight up into the target market and skipped some things. This is really good. It is
Awesome.
so clear.
Yeah, and the usual disclaimers that it's not always exactly this for everyone, right? Like every business is going to emphasize things. Your own business might be doing it in a different order. So we'll also figure out how to properly customize it for you.
Sure. But every one of these questions needs an answer.
Yeah.
These
And
are
we may
different
have to add a bunch of them. So what we're going to do is next to each one, you're going to copy and paste the various color coding
Okay.
for what color that step is going to be. Based on green is you have solved it with data. Yellow is you have a hypothesis, but you haven't proven it yet. And red is like, this is a major critical unknown.
Okay. Legally possible. Yes. Technically possible. Yes. Systems, data integrations, components are necessary. Yes. This is what I've been doing the last 3 months. This is what all of these interviews were about.
That is your big unknown that you just described. Like, what is the form factor of the actual tool?
Gotcha.
But there's a bunch of buying stuff up higher that I think you still have greens and yellows on.
That's interesting. And that actually shows me why I don't know exactly who the target buyer is, because that is different for each person. Yeah, I guess I know the pricing model, but not the pricing.
I guess I can actually add a gray line here.
This is a tough one, because this is what's constantly keeping me awake, is the privacy aspect. Like, how do we show managers enough and coach them to be better managers enough without compromising individual users about privacy?
I'm going to pull this out and add a category for you. I think the privacy question is so essential. All right. So how did that feel to you?
I mean, exciting. I can see how these questions I've been trying to answer are related. So I have a better idea of how to go about starting to answer them.
Well, you've done a lot on the buyer journey side, but our real question is, what does the actual little product look like? And I think it's great that we're actually answering that last, because we have more needs gathering before then. So what I like to do when I'm looking at a board like this is, where are the lowest reds? Because that's really where you want to get started, unless you have a giant patch of yellows. But in this case, I do feel like your patch of yellows down here is okay. There's just more sales research to be done, but it makes sense to hit the more powerful reds first. So I would love to build some really quick prototypes around possible designs, and then go to a prospective buyer and test both your landing page or your current sales assets, as well as some specific mock-ups of form factor. And so what I'd like to ask you to do is build like 2 to 3 quick, very different form factor prototypes.
So can you tell me exactly what a form factor means?
Yes. Great question. Yeah. So I would just visually draw a shitty example of what the end user might see and what the manager might see. and maybe
Gotcha.
the executive dashboard as well.
Mhm.
And then do 2 versions of each based on your 2 favorite but most different guesses about form factor. So there's the like, this is a tool in and of itself version, for example, or the this is a Slack integration version, or like this is a Google integration version. You can do this in Canva if you're not technical and create just boxes for the pop-ups that they would see. So we're going to combine your current website, which captures a lot of your yellows because it's sales messaging, communication, and narrative focused. It's value proposition focused. But since your reds are form factor, then we really want prototypes that really expose the biggest vulnerability. And then we'll run a user test combining your website and those assets. What we can do is have another call to go over your prototype. So you can do your first pass and then we can do some prototype editing together. And then we'll do a user testing call.
Thank you for listening to Prototype Thinking in Action. Please don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join our email list and follow us for exclusive access to tools, case studies, and live workshops. All links can be found in the description below. See you next time.